Before I can start talking about cellular respiration, we need to talk first about where it is we actually get our energy from. In the previous class, we talked about photosynthesis, and we talked about the two steps of photosynthesis, the light-dependent reactions and the Calvin cycle. The end result of photosynthesis is that I make glucose, and I also make O2. When it comes to getting energy, glucose is what I care about, and that is where cellular respiration comes in. I can go and I can eat my broccoli or my lettuce or whatever plant you can think of. I have to be able to take the glucose that photosynthesis made for me by eating this plant. I have to figure out how I break it down. Now, before we can actually talk about how that works, we got to talk about where we actually get our energy from. So where does your energy come from? That's a pretty simple question. Probably before you watched this video, you had a snack or maybe you even ate dinner. So the answer is your food. It's from the food that you consume. However, our food, we have to be able to break it down in order to get the nutrients that we need. In order to do the food lab that is coming up next, we need to understand how certain things are broken down and what we get out of them. At the very end of photosynthesis, I get glucose out of it. 1 gram of sugar, and I'm going to talk specifically about glucose because that's the one that means the most to me. I can also talk about fructose, I could talk about maltose, I could talk about sucrose, which is the sugar that you would find on your table. I can talk about all of those, but glucose is what I'm most interested in since we are talking about photosynthesis. If I break down 1 gram of glucose, it yields 3,811 calories. Now, calories, where have you heard that word before? Probably thinking food labels. These calories that I'm talking about right now, those are different from the calories that you know of. When you read a food label, you are actually looking at a different kind of calories. Calories that I have written right here are similar, but they are different. And what's the only difference between the way I wrote the 2 calories? It's my C's. Food labels have calories with a capital C. That actually means you're talking about kilocalories when you're talking about what is on a food label. The calories that I'm more interested in is the lowercase calorie, the base unit of calories. If you're having trouble thinking about this, I'm just using the metric system. Since it's got kilo in front of it, that's all I am using. Hopefully you remember metric system. Just as a quick review, you have kilo, hecto, you have deca, you have your base unit, whatever it is, and in this case it is going to be your calories. You have deci, you have centi, and you have milli. K, H, D, C, D, C, M. Good way to remember this, if you haven't ever heard this before, is King Henry died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk. And it'll help you remember your metric system. King Henry died unexpectedly, which corresponds to your unit that you could use, and that could be your meters, liters, grams, calories in this case. It can be a whole bunch of different things, but it's your basic unit, drinking chocolate milk. They all correspond to the parts of the metric system. Now, when I am talking about calories with a little c, I'm talking about my basic unit. If I'm talking about calories with a big C, then I'm talking about the calories that are way up here. So to break it down, 1 kilocal is equal to 1,000 calories. And that's how you would abbreviate calorie as CAL. And you put the K at the beginning in order to designate that it's kilocal. So if you go back to my very first thing, I said 1 gram of C6H12O6 is equal to 3,811 calories. How many kilocalories is that? All you would have to do is look at your metric system. For now, I am right here, and I know that I have 3,811, and I want to move up to the kilocalories. All you have to do is count how many spots you have to move over and in which direction, and that tells you how many spots you move your decimal and in which direction. So to go from calories to kilocalories, I go 1, 2, 3 spots to the left. So on my numbers, I go 3 spots to the left, and my decimal is understood to be back here. I go 1, 2, 3 spots to the left. So I know that if I break down 1 gram of glucose, I end up with 3.811 kilocalories at the end of it. And it's simple as that. Now, we are about to do, when you come into class, we're going to do a food energy lab. And basically what I'm going to ask you to do is take different types of food and burn them. And we are going to try to measure how many calories they give off when you burn them. Which food gives you the most bang for your buck? How many of it gives you the most calories so it would supply you with the most energy theoretically? We're not going to take into account fat and all that other bad stuff. We're just going to take into account energy. And that's a great lab to do in class, but there are some issues with that lab that I'm going to talk about for this last bit of the lecture. Ask yourself, do your cells burn food in the same way as we will burn food in class? Hopefully, just by looking at that question, you are telling me a big, fat, resounding no. Absolutely not. This is not how our body burns the food that we take in. Reason being, the one big flaw in this lab is if a cell burned its food all at once, you wouldn't get that energy. Our cells could not capture that energy. So if we burned food like the lab, most of the energy given off would be lost. Our cells would not be able to capture the energy. So, what do our cells do? How does our cells capture energy? Think about those two questions and try to come up with an answer. If we can't burn our food like we're going to do in this lab and capture the energy that we needed, how do we do it instead? How do our cells capture energy? Think about that question and then bring it into me, and that's where we'll start when I see you in class.